Gentlemen, tomorrow is a test. The Unit 4 executive test. Surprise! Surprise!
I think we should take it lunch.
The thing is, some teachers give pop quizzes, and I'm like, no way, go big or go home. So I'm thinking, just boom, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Now, so tomorrow's test, and this is a real thing, will be happening. However, this test will be different than your other tests. It will be open notes. You will be able to use one of the textbooks. There we go. All right. So, two stories for you. The first one is about this country here. What country? North Korea. This is North Korea. Now, before we talk about what happened new in North Korea, I want to bring us all up to speed on how unusual of a country this really is. You have to understand that North Korea is not old. It is 60 years old. It has only had 3 leaders ever in its entire history. It was Kim Il-sung, the guy who actually started the revolution, and then his son took over, whose name was Kim Jong-il, and then his son took over, whose name is Kim Jong-un. It is just 3 people, and they are father, son, son. So the entire North Korea is related to a single family who were treated essentially like gods inside their own country. They are referred to as their leader. There are giant statues of paintings of them in people's houses. It's actually the only picture you're allowed to hang in your house. Is a painting of one of these 3 people. So it is a very different country. In fact, when Kim Jong-un, when his father died, what did he say upon his father's death? Good. He said, "It looks like my father's Korea is over." Oh. His Korea. Oh. His Korea. Okay, man, this joke has not worked well today. That's tough. Tough crowd. It's North Korea. Oh. Korea. All right, we got there. I knew you guys would get there. All right, so today, North Korea is still dramatically different than any other country. They are, even though very tiny and very poor, have one of the largest militaries in the entire world. They have giant military parades often. That's the women in the North Korean army right there, yeah. They have their rocket launchers are pulled by what appears to be war tractors. I mean, that's a thing. And for entertainment, instead of watching sports, they have these giant stadiums that perform what's called the mass games, where thousands of people move in unison. So imagine seeing like Palms or the marching band, only there's no instruments, and there's like 6,000 people on this deal. That's what North Korea is. If you go to Pyongyang, which is the capital of North Korea, their largest city, remember, still very poor, almost no one in the country owns a car, so this is what rush hour looks like in Pyongyang. It is very different from everywhere else in the world. And you have these massive statues of the leaders of North Korea. You have, as you walk by normal buildings, just giant 50-foot photographs and portraits of them. And then at night, we have this thing, this satellite view, where like our satellites can take pictures by night, and you see basically all the electricity, all the lights in a country. So it allows you to see where the major cities are, because you get the really big yellow dots where there's lots of light. But here's the thing, this is for South Korea. Remember, South Korea is basically like Asian America. It's the same as what we have here. That's what South Korea looks like. Here's North Korea by the same satellite view. They are 99% without electricity. That is Pyongyang. That is the capital of their country, the only place with any light during nighttime ever. Okay, so North Korea, very different. That's what I'm trying to hammer home here. Why am I talking about all this? Because it turns out earlier this week there was a secret meeting between Kim Jong-un and one of our guys, Mike Pompeo, who will soon be the Secretary of State. This is the first time we've had a meeting between Un and an American leader in like 60 years. This is a very big deal. They met secretly, trying to talk about getting rid of North Korea's nuclear weapons. Yesterday, Donald Trump publicly said that Kim Jong-un is a very, quote, honorable man, which is not something we've ever said about Kim Jong-un before. Remember, this guy killed his uncle with an aircraft carrier gun. So this may mean that we're moving towards a new era with, what?
So, he like put his uncle right there. They got like a gun.
You got like an anti-aircraft gun.
And just shot him.
Mm-hmm, right.
Why? There's like so
Did we not talk about this before?
No.
Oh, I thought we talked about this. We did. His father was executed by firing squad, but instead of using rifles, they used the anti-aircraft gun.
It's like a waste of money.
Well, it sends a message, I would imagine, right?
So his dad need to be like just in pieces everywhere, pretty much.
I mean, I'd rather be.
Wow.
So the reason I'm talking about all of this is because this week, starting Monday, this coming week, North and South Korea will meet for the first time in like 40 years to talk about actual real peace talks, which is huge. It would happen at the one place you're allowed to cross between North and South Korea. It is the most heavily militarized border in the entire world. It is full of landmines, machine guns, barbed wire. You can only cross right here at the border between North and South Korea. Now this area, this is basically South Korea, that's North Korea, and this is basically no man's land, where only guards will basically face off against each other across the border. They meet inside this blue building right there, which has a single phone. It is the only way to communicate between North and South Korea and like the entire country, and they will meet there on Monday. Literally, this is what it looks like. These are South Korean guards who just stare across the border, waiting for a possible invasion. And the North Korean guards, the reason you don't see them is because they are also watching North Korea in case someone tries to escape across the border. Anyone who tries to escape to South Korea is shot and killed on sight. So all of this goes down starting Monday. We might actually see real peace between these two countries, which would be incredible. Last thing I'll mention about this story is that America, if you look at the longest wars in American history, a lot of them are fairly recent. We have the Iraq War, Afghanistan, Vietnam went on for a long time. But Korea is often considered to be a 4-year war, and that's incorrect. We stopped like hostilities in 1953, but we still have 30,000 troops there to this day. That war is still going on. We have never signed a peace treaty. So the Korean War, by far, is the longest war we've ever fought. It's been going on for like 65 years at this point. And maybe it actually ends in the next couple of years. That would be amazing. All right. Second and last story for you is about this country, China. Now China, today we're talking about Chinese babies, actually. China is famous for a policy they put into place several decades ago, to do what? To limit their population. What did China do, CJ? They have what's called a one-child policy, right? So every family is allowed one kid and one kid only. What happens if you have more than one child? No, we don't just kill babies. So you can, basically, if you keep the second child, there are heavy, heavy taxes associated with it. So only very rich Chinese people can have multiple babies. If you have a kid accidentally, typically go into adoption. There's a lot of Chinese adoption services for that reason, but you get one and only one. Is this policy still in effect?
Yes.
It is not. It stopped 5 years ago. In fact, if you know Mr. Ivan, who teaches social studies, he married a woman from China, a Chinese national, that lives here with him, and she is an only child, as is every one of her friends. Like, it's a whole generation of people where there's just no brothers and sisters. And now, as long as you're an only child, you are allowed to marry another only child, and you can have 2 children. So they have slightly increased, essentially, the quota on what's going on in China. So it's a really interesting policy, but that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is this specific baby who was born to 2 Chinese parents last week. Now what makes the story unusual is that the father died in a car crash 4 years ago. But what makes the story even stranger is that the mom died in the same car crash.
Wait.
So how did this happen? Both parents died 4 years ago. The baby was born last week.
Sperm eggs.
Basically it is. They had both frozen their sperm and egg, which were later fertilized. But how were they grown? How do we grow that baby? Yeah, it was called a surrogate. Will grow the baby. Now, the thing is, this is completely illegal. You cannot do this in China. It's against the law. But basically, you're creating a test tube baby, right? You're going to fertilize the egg. You plant it inside of a surrogate. It grows up. It grows in the womb. And all of a sudden, you have the child of these 2 people that died 4 years ago. Now, the actual surrogate is not from China because, of course, this is illegal there. And so this whole process, first off, who's paying for this? How is this working? Who's doing this? It is, in fact, both sets of grandparents who want to continue the family line and are willing to go through all these steps and break the law to make this happen. So if it's illegal in China, how are they doing it? Yeah. The woman, the surrogate, is from Laos. And so basically they went down with the egg and the fertilized egg into Laos. They implanted it in the surrogate, and she's been hanging out in Laos for the last 9 months, basically just having the baby grow inside of her. But second problem is that kid, once born, a Chinese citizen. This is difficult, right? So in this case, what they did is the woman from Laos, when she was 9 months pregnant, she decided to take a vacation to China, and while she was in China, she accidentally gave birth right there in China. Is the kid a Chinese citizen?
Yes.
Sure is. 2 Chinese parents, genetically at least, born in China makes that kid a Chinese citizen. So, just amazing. The idea is we could see more and more stories like this. We have the science to do so. There's even like I've heard that there's the ability to now grow embryos without needing a host mother in the first place. You could grow them in a vat somewhere, which means essentially if you wanted to have a kid, let's say 30 years from now, and you're like, you know what, I don't want to go through all those. I don't want to have the belly and all that. I'll just have some vat grow it instead. It's fascinating to think where this world is taking us. Modern medicine. Okay. All right, that's it. Done with